you've got a nice haircut as well.
Yeah, you noticed. Yes, it's we have a lovely girl called Roz comes and does it here at the house. So it had been a good couple of months, probably more. So it was long overdue.
Right then, ladies and gentlemen, it's 1-1. It's inevitable that England came back given their catastrophic performance at Lord's, and at Leeds, it was all hunky-dory for Joe Root and company. And to, of course, decipher it with me, we have David Gower. David, you mentioned the word bounce back ability. That's exactly what transpired.
Absolutely. It's only sort of 4 or 5 days ago we were discussing the options for this Leeds Test match, with a little hesitation, shall we say. Because of course all the signs were that India had gained the advantage at Lord's and done so beautifully. But yeah, that word, bounce back ability, I mean, that was coined some years ago when England had exactly this habit: play below average one day or over one set of 5 days, and then bounce back and play like gods for the next set of, 4 days in this case. So what they did up in Leeds was extraordinary. I mean, and I have to say, the one key element I think was the bowling. And when we compared the two attacks after the first couple of games, it looked like we were quite right in saying things like India have a very strong seam bowling attack. And yet at Leeds, only one of those attacks managed to get the ball to hit the right lengths and to move. And that's one of those inexplicable things. Jimmy Anderson was absolutely brilliant. Robinson as the man of the match, absolutely brilliant. Those two were, of course, the mainstays. And even Overton, I know we discussed the possible teams. We'd kind of overlooked James Overton, but he had a fabulous game too. So, they can say to themselves they've got everything right pretty much. Selectors picked the right team, picked the men in form, and they did the job for them. And it just proves one thing, and one thing only, about this game of cricket: there is absolutely nothing predictable about it.
Yeah, you can't predict it. I mean, we have the world's best cricket predicting engine in terms of analytics with cricket.com, but even that was kind of going pear-shaped after a point of time. But I want to talk about Joe Root, and we'll talk about his batting in a bit. But he, of course, goes into the record books for claiming the most wins as England Test captain, 27, and to do it in front of his home crowd was just so special. Now, he admitted in his post-match press conference, David, that England won the game on day one. Do you see it like that? Because at the end of the day, 78 being blown off that shows that India's batting capitulations are there and there to see.
Yeah, I mean, it was on the back of some brilliant bowling. I have sympathy for any batsman from anywhere in the world watching, for instance, especially Anderson, because what I've seen before over the years, Jimmy obviously is our, look at the facts and the figures. He is our leading bowler of all time, and this proves why. And again, it just emphasizes how ridiculous in many ways it is that he's still bowling so well at his age, because it's pretty much unheard of to be so athletic, so live, so fit at his age, and do what he does at his age is just brilliant and extraordinary. And what he did right was he got absolutely the length spot on. And I've seen him before, once or twice, or more than once or twice over the years, in fact, with people like Stuart Broad alongside him, where the two of them in tandem have just been 2 foot, 3 foot too short, maybe. They bowl beautifully. It looks like they bowl beautifully, but they've not picked up the wickets. And what he and the others did on that first day was they just got consistently up there. They found the movement. Yes, there was the usual sort of thing at Headingley which helps it, which is cloud cover. But they found the movement, and they were very, very good at persisting with that right length and with that right line. So I have absolute sympathy with any batsman of any quality anywhere in the world coming up against bowling like that under those conditions, because they seem to make it as near unplayable as possible. And in a way, it highlights, again, the unpredictability of this game, because it's not as though England bowled badly in the previous two Test matches, Trent Bridge and Lord's. They went past the bat. For instance, Trent Bridge used that as the perfect example. They went past the bat countless times, and yet Sharma and Rahul were able to get runs and put runs on the board as an opening partnership. Whereas first day at Headingley, it's just one of those days, I'm afraid, where everything, I say I'm afraid, I suppose as an Englander, as an Englishman, I should be very happy and very proud. Just one of those days where everything clicked into place, lengths, lines, the edges were taken. Instead of play and miss, it was an edge, and the catching was good. So that's what happens. And then once you've done that, once you've bowled a side out for less than 80 like that, as the captain, as Virat Kohli said himself at the post match conferences, once that happens, you are always up against it, however well you play after that.
Yeah, we saw that in Adelaide, that 36 all. I think the Australians started the
Mm.
same reasons that everything that the Indians played at, they edged it, and it was one of those days. And what was worse, the fact that the English openers actually went on to get 100 plus stands. So in many ways, the first 1.5 days was just shambolic from the Indian point of view. You mentioned a certain 39-year-old over there. I'm talking about James Anderson. 400 wickets now at home. Have you seen any other bowler thrive better in his own backyard?
Not really, and not so consistently. Because I mean, my great friend and colleague, Mr. Botham, sorry, Lord Botham, I keep forgetting, but Ian Botham, who in his pomp was brilliant too, absolutely brilliant. I mean, I've seen Ian destroy batting lineups from the late 70s, mid 70s, late 70s onwards. Played with him from 1978 through to, in fact, he lasted longer than I did, strangely. But his bowling was at its best, probably maybe the first decade or so. In the last few years, it lost some of its luster. I mean, he lost a bit of pace. He lost a bit of that nip that makes the quicker bowlers important and good. And he became a canny medium pacer as opposed to that genuine fast medium, aggressive and successful bowler. So the difference here, and the reason Jimmy has been is putting these figures in the record books, is that he is fitter, leaner, stronger than Ian was at the equivalent time. And that's a huge tribute to his professionalism and his attitude to the game of Test cricket. So there are very few. Some of the West Indies, I mean, Courtney Walsh went on for quite some time. Kapil Dev, of course, went on for quite some time. But Kapil was the same. He lost pace and he could still swing the ball, still had his tricks, could still get wickets, but he lost that little bit of pace that made him special in his pomp as well. Whereas Jimmy at the moment is bowling simply as well as he ever has done. And when he does that, he is a mighty, mighty tough man to face. So I mean, my hat comes off. If I should have put one on, it comes off. I mean, I bow in respect and awe to Jimmy the way he's doing these things. And of course, that then leads others to follow suit. So I mean, for instance, Robinson getting his 5 in the second innings, again, did exactly the same things pretty much. Got his lines right, lengths right, kept it up there, and the ball was still moving for him as well. And he seems to have taken to this game of Test cricket like a duck to water as well. So that sort of combination is very, very tough to face. So at the crucial times, England just got everything right in this Test match. First morning, as you say, the opening partnership, that made a nice change for Joe Root to actually have his feet up for more than 15 minutes. And things just, when they fall into place like that, you get the right results. But of course, we're going to end up very soon having to look ahead and wonder what's going to happen in the next 2 games. And again, it's probably anyone's guess.
Yeah, it is anyone's guess, and it's just tantalizingly poised, and that's what we love about a 5-match series, because it brings the best and the worst out of both sides. Right, let's just finish up this England chat by asking about Ollie Robinson. You mentioned him there. We talk about batting partnerships, or bowling partnerships as well, are critical. Anderson, Robinson, we saw that, how well they utilize that new ball in the morning. Now, Robinson, what do you make of him? Because he's leading the first-class wicket-taking charts in 2021. He's, like you mentioned, taking like a duck to water in Test cricket. And given that the injuries which have been plaguing England, no Broad, no Stokes, no Wokes, no Archer, I mentioned this even in the preview, he's certainly taking that mantle brilliantly.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to see, because there is always that question mark when people do well in county cricket, and in fact across the world in first-class cricket, and they make the step up to Test match cricket. Will they have the mental capacity, the physical capacity? Because especially the first couple of games, it can be very physically draining, because it's perfectly natural to have a bundle of nerves in here, down there, in your legs. I mean, your legs feel heavy. Quite often you'll find that young bowlers coming into a Test match for the first time will say, well, I never felt that before. County cricket, I mean, for instance, playing at Sussex, never felt heavy legs before. I never lost stamina like that before. And that was one of the early things that people were observing in those first couple of games he played, that he seemed to tail off towards the end of the day. But his spells at Leeds were long. His intensity was high. So I would guess, I mean, without getting into his mind, and I don't want to start doing things like that, I would guess, he's starting to relax into the role. He's got all the confidence that you get from succeeding at the start of a career like this, and things are going well for him. So he's in the right place at the right time. And the fact that others are missing, this, I suppose, is good news for England as a whole, because it points to the depth that they have in this department. So to be able to say you've got Robinson coming in to start like this, you've got Overton coming in to bowl as well as he did, and you've got those others waiting in the wings, ready to try and force a way back if they possibly can. But how are they going to get back in when things are going so well as they are at the moment? So it's a nice problem to have if you're an England captain or selector. It's very nice for Joe Root to have people of this sort of caliber in the team at the moment, able to get in the result that he's so desperately needed in this test match. Because, of course, as we know, had it been 2-0 at the end of this one, 2 to play, well, that's India in a very, very strong position and very confident. Now, of course, we have two sides thinking, well, which is the real, who are the real, which is the really strong side here? Which is the dominant side here? Because you've had 2 wins, one at Lord's for India, one at Leeds for England, which have been very, very dominant by that particular winning side. So good luck in the next 2.
Yeah, good luck indeed. At the end of the day, both teams will go back to the drawing board and see, you know what, there's certain things that we need to really tinker. And that brings me nicely to India next, because there are lots of people, of course, throwing daggers, and rightly so, calling us bottle jobs and whatnot. I wouldn't go as far, but if India missed a player from the bench, who was it? And if they haven't, is it a bigger cause for concern, David?
Yeah, well, we talked before this game about Ashwin. We talked before the Lord's game about Ashwin. We talked before the first game about Ashwin. I suspect now he's probably sat out enough games and that he might well get a game at the Oval. The Oval is a pitch which he knows. He's got wickets there, I think, this summer already. Had that sort of brief spell in county cricket before this tour got underway. And I think the Oval is a good pitch for spinners. So with Ishant looking a little off the pace at Leeds, you've still got 3 good seamers who will probably get something from that pitch as well. You've still got that sort of that balance between the two sides, between good seam attacks. And we saw with Moeen, just towards the end, on this final day, this 4th day at Leeds, there was that beautiful one at Shami, which, just dipped and swerved a little bit, then turned back nicely. Those are dream balls for any spinner. Now, I think whatever the pitch at the Oval, and it is likely to be a pretty good pitch all round, I think Ashwin will get something from it. I think India will look at him anyway, thinking, well, we probably need the runs because maybe Lord's was an aberration. All those runs down the order at Lord's, maybe that was an aberration. It probably was when you consider that the people getting those runs at the crucial time on day 5, average less than 10 in Test cricket. So you've got someone in Ashwin who makes hundreds in Test cricket, someone who is the most experienced and one of the, if not the finest spinner in the world at the moment. And so I would be very, very surprised if we're not sort of sitting here in a few days' time discussing the options ahead of that game for the Oval if he's not very much at the top of that list for someone to come in and play his first game of the series and to help change things around again for India.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because, correct me if I'm wrong, just from an Indian lens, the way we look at it as fans and pundits back home, maybe we're concentrating too much on our bowling depth because we talk about the last 4 or 5 years in Test cricket for India. We haven't produced an attack. You mentioned that as well. Are we forgetting our batting chinks? I mean, because there have been some sort of fallouts. We saw that in Adelaide. We're seeing this, of course, at Lord's. We saw it today as well. I mean, India's batting, that really needs to be addressed, right?
Well, it does, because what is needed, I mean, for instance, right, just going back to Joe Root in England for a moment, Joe is making hundreds.
Yeah.
And there is a difference, isn't there, between, say, 50, 60, 70, 80, and someone making 120, 150. Those big hundreds are the key to putting those extra runs on the board, even if 1 or 2 miss out. And I've always said this, and I'm sure I've said it to you before. In any given batting lineup on any given day, 1 or 2 will miss out, even if everyone's in form. So 1 or 2 will miss out. That's the way the game works. But if, say 4 out the top 6 get you runs and good runs, then you're very much in the game. Now, we've seen over the course of these last 2 games, and what will confuse things for India's selectors, India's management now is this. We've seen the opening partnership do very well up until this game at Leeds. So the first 2 games, they were in very fine form. That doesn't just disappear. And of course, as openers, as England's openers will tell you, you always run the chance, run the risk of getting a good ball early on when that ball is new and the bowling is potentially at its best. So openers always run that risk. You've got Pujara, who fell, 9 runs short of 100. You've got Rahane, who got a half century at Lord's, but has been out of the runs elsewhere and doesn't look quite at his best at the moment. But we know how, for instance, going back to Australia. So not that long ago, he's able to come back from the lowest of the low to lead by example, as he did there, make 100 at Melbourne, and you're back in form again. So it's not as though they're all completely out of form. And even Virat, who's been tested severely by Jimmy Anderson, he looked good on day 3. Yes, he didn't last long on day 4. But somewhere in there is a batting performance which will actually put the runs back on the board again. And it's possible that the Oval is the right sort of pitch for them. Over the years, it's been a good batting pitch. Again, I don't like making predictions about pitches when I'm a couple of hundred miles away from it as we speak, when we're a few days away from seeing what it looks like on day 1 of the Test match. But you never know. It should be a pretty good pitch, I would suspect. So from a batting point of view, from a team point of view, you look at those performances, respective performances in the last 2 games, and a lot of people have ticked a box at some stage or other. So are you going to tinker? And of course, there is always this, and I know how it feels. I've seen it from both sides of the fence. There's always this huge temptation, as you mentioned just now, for fans to react quickly. And when your side loses, to react badly. Which in this game, it doesn't work, I'm afraid. Yes, of course, you can be disappointed when your side has lost, when you were hoping they would win. That's sport. That's what fans do in sport. And it's what makes sport so visceral for so many people, because it's so emotional. It triggers these emotions. But this is where the professionals, i.e. team management, the players themselves, are paid to keep cool heads. So from Ravi Shastri down, they will assess what happened. Virat at the TV cameras after the game, he wasn't surly, he wasn't downcast, he was obviously disappointed, and you will be, whatever front you put on when you're in front of the cameras, he will have some severe words, some strong words, I'm sure, to say to his team in the dressing room and ahead of the game at the Oval. But it is a time for cool heads. You look at the things you've done well, and that's what sides always do when they're in these circumstances. And you quite rightly say it's the great magic of a 5-test series where you're allowed to have time, or given time, to have these ups and downs. If you have these ups and downs, it makes it even more interesting for both the teams and the people watching, and for people like us trying to analyze it. It's intriguing. It's absolutely intriguing. And if England can bounce back so strongly, well, maybe India can bounce back so strongly when they get to the next game. Either way, we won't know the result of this series until the end of the 5th and final Test match.
Yeah, well summed up there. And we'll, of course, nitpick further with you previewing the 4th Test, which you guys can catch it, I think, on a Tuesday, guys. So subscribe to the cricket.com channel, and then you can, of course, hear from the man himself. Let me just finish up here, because whose camp would you be in right now? Of course, England in this high, hammering India by an innings and 76 runs. India, of course, can point fingers at England's inconsistency. And this Test match is so crucial, because whoever takes the initiative here, you feel it's catch-up cricket in Manchester, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to remind you again of my 2-2 prediction, which is still, thankfully, on. It's the one prediction I've made which is still potentially viable. So I'm sticking to that. And in fact, the way these last 2 games have gone, it would be no surprise if it was 2-2 now, because I think, as you say, there are weaknesses in both teams. There are moments of vulnerability that we've seen from both teams, and yet there's huge quality in both teams. So it is, looking ahead to the Oval again, it is the side that manages to get the most from its best players, and the number of its best players getting their best performances out in that next game, that will decide the result at the Oval. And I sincerely hope there's nothing that gets in the way. For instance, our great British summer, as we're now heading into September, which can be a month of very nice weather, actually, to be fair. We'll see what happens there. But this is so beautifully set up with 2 really good sides, 2 really competitive sides. It's so beautifully set up for a great culmination to what will be a well-remembered series, I'm sure.